All right, we are right at the 1 o'clock mark here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you all for taking time out to be with us today. This is part 3 of our 4-part series, providing actionable insights for your business in response to COVID-19. Really, the purpose of this webinar is to respond to how the workplace has changed. Leadership team over here realized with our diverse backgrounds that we could help provide some insights for everyone to consider as we all navigate through how these recent changes have impacted not just our businesses, but our lives. And kind of a lot of companies, ourselves included, are realizing some new pain points that have been exposed and kind of feeling some other ones that were there, but just not quite so loud. And so the purpose of this webinar is to really provide some actionable insights to hopefully help you navigate through these times. So a little bit about the MC, that is me, Blake Cundiff. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Alliance Corporate. I have 15 years of experience as a consultant, strategist, and a sales and marketing executive in a few different service industries. I also sit on the board of directors for a local nonprofit that helps families create memories during a difficult time dealing with cancer treatments. In addition, I'm a top 3 fundraising team captain and speaker for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. So really my role at Alliance Corporate is what I like to describe as a facilitator. We're made up of 3 companies: Alliance Technology, Alliance Systems, and Alliance Advisors. And between those 3 companies, there's such a crossover between, all aspects of a business operation and across every department of the organizational chart. So with each client and potential client, they're all different. And so my job is to really just listen, understand where the pain points are, and facilitate conversations with our talented team across the different companies. But that's enough about me. We should really meet the presenter here. I am excited to introduce you to Cesar Keller. He's the co-founder and chief experience officer at Alliance System, which is a boutique software development company helping business owners who are optimizing and tackling digital transformation initiatives. Cesar has over 20 years experience across branding, marketing, UX, UI, agile management, and digital product design initiatives. He holds 2 MIT certifications in human-centered interaction design and master design thinking, which serve as foundations for the thought and leadership process that forms the DNA at Alliance Systems. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cesar to share his experience here.
All right, well, thank you very much, Blake. A pleasure to be on here. And we had some pretty good presentations by Kurt and Kirk in the last weeks leading up to today. So thank you very much for the time. Today, the agenda, we're going to cover 3 different things. The first one is kind of dissecting the pain or the challenges of remote and being optimized and working with people across systems. The second one is with new challenges. Obviously, we have to create new plans, knowing that we're going through a pandemic. We have to be able to adapt and create those new plans to execute. And then I'm just going to share some practical examples. I want this to be a very casual conversation about maybe sharing some of my experiences, what I've done, and seeing if it resonates with the audience, and hopefully get some questions at the end.
Hey, Cesar, real quickly, I forgot to mention too, I'll be fielding questions in the chat panel throughout the entire webinar. So if you feel more comfortable sending that to me privately, go ahead, or you can send it to the group. But go ahead and send those. I will collect them, and at the end, we'll talk through them with a question and answer session. Sorry.
Well, no, that's all right. So the first thing I like to do is I always like to kind of say this sentence, right? Falling in love with the problem is probably the best thing, right? It's truly understanding what the challenges are, because once you do that, it allows you to make some intelligent and informed decisions. So when it comes to remote work, here are some of the main challenges that a lot of teams talk about. So the first one is poor time management. Some people are great at time management, and some people are bad at it. It really comes down to the nature of people. But obviously, these things are affected based on, do you have the right systems? Do you have the right accountability structure? Do you have the right number of check-ins? And probably a big one is a trust factor, right? Between the team, the managers, and executive leadership. And sometimes, specifically in times like these, we can't just lean on technology. It really comes down to soft skills. It comes down to leadership quality and clear communications. The second one that we talk about is tech issues. This is a very, this one surfaces up to the top very, very quickly. When we talk about web conferencing tools, we could talk about communication applications, and there's a certain level of base technology that's required to be able to tap in and leverage these systems. So for example, today we're leveraging the Zoom application for this webinar. There are many other types of those applications. There's things besides tech issues that we have to deal with that sometimes people don't realize. So for example, my house has, my wife who's a teacher, I have 3 kids, and they're all going through this e-learning. They're all logging into Zooms for their school and classroom. When a couple of kids aren't doing that, my wife is trying to teach first-year-old or first graders. And not only that, we might have kids that are streaming bandwidth on Netflix and stuff like that. So having the tech issues at home as much as tech issues at the office is the new normal. But we're getting through it, right? Besides tech issues, we have communication. Team communication is such a critical aspect of everything. However, it's more than just using the apps like I've mentioned. You really need an operating plan. And we're going to get into some of those details. But ultimately, we're talking about policies. You need administrators. You've got to think about onboarding people into new applications. Sometimes there's training that you have to do, not only on the applications, but the context and use of how the team is coming together. So those are on more maybe on the business side, if you will. These are more on the personal side to some degree. Working too much. When you don't have to commute, and literally all you do is I go from my bedroom, walk down the stairs, and I'm in this office. I literally can work nonstop from early morning till late day. And there's no driving, there's no extra meetings, everything's at home. So you gotta be careful when it comes to burnout. We're talking about distractions. Obviously we have families, we have pets, we have friends, we have lifestyles. In fact, today, if you see my kids running in the background or you hear some background noise, full apologies up front, but it is what it is, and we all have to get used to that, right? And we've all had that kid that comes in behind us and says, hey, how's it going? And you're like, hey, I'm in a meeting. So it's just the reality of life, and that's okay. The last one is bad health. And this is one that, sitting in front of a computer, at least in my industry, I've been doing this for years and years and years. You gotta get up, you gotta stretch, you gotta do some exercise, you gotta have some stimulus with humans and people and teams outside of just staring at the computer all day, or else we'd go nuts. So dealing with that during this pandemic is something that a lot of people, it's different for them, but for remote teams and where I've been doing that for a while. Sometimes you can resolve those things as simple, like I have a husky and I like walking him outside as much as I can. It can be about learning a little bit more about posture, the level of your monitors, how to sit properly and try to keep that posture correct. I use lenses with blue eye protection to protect my eyes to reduce headache and eye strain. All the little things of what happens when you're staring at screens all day long. And one that I didn't mention here is the logistics of multiple teams in different time zones. Depending on how big your organization is or how widespread your talent is in different areas. I had really good experiences in working for a company out of San Francisco. And really, they had 3 different main sections. We're running across time zones. The headquarters was in San Francisco. Some of our production teams were here in St. Louis and in the Midwest. And then we had several teams in South America and Eastern Europe and Poland. So we had multiple time zones that we had to figure out. The neat part about that challenge is once we structured certain things, the company never shut off because of time zones. It started in Europe, they passed the baton over to South America and the Midwest, and then we passed the baton on to the Pacific Coast. And then it just started. So essentially the company was running 24/7. So those are just some dynamics to think about, to chew on as far as what are the challenges to understanding remote work. That being said, it's an opportunity to create a better working culture because we have to work under a new normal. So what constitutes a new plan? How do you even create a brand new plan? One of the things that I think you got to consider the most is starting with your culture, and particularly two different topics inside of that culture. The first is transparency, and the second one is accountability. There's so many ways that you can manage teams, but typically when you're talking about going to work, going to an office, going to an aggregated area where there's a lot of people, there's accountability just built into, okay, people are here, I can see them, we have supervisors, we can see that they're doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. How does that change when your workforce is no longer under one roof? So that culture, I feel, is very, very important. It has to come up from the top. It's got to come from executive leadership. It's got to have a unified vision, of course, and you got to be committed to this execution. Well, how do you think about those particular things? Number one, you might have to get educated. If your executive team has never run remote systems, remote people, and have the soft skills to manage people across these systems, especially if they're disparate, like I was mentioning before, there's some education that you can get to talent up and level up. A big thing is presenting a unified voice. And sometimes that's more than just saying we're moving into these systems and here's how we're going to do it. Sometimes it's based on we got to rewrite policies and we got to get out those old rule books and kind of make adaptive changes. And we have to allow people to ask good questions and feel like they're participating. Without having clarity, it's just going to be a very challenging situation. As far as the, moving more into execution besides policies, there's obviously systems that have to be in place. Those systems need to be reinforced by your infrastructure. So it might mean logging into a VPN. It might mean dealing with certain security based on those systems. Who has access and permission to all these systems? And then obviously collaborating with various people on various different teams. It can go from production teams to finance to HR. All different departments have different needs. So understanding how all the communications connect the dots, very important. So just to highlight, this is more than just we need software and we need to be able to log into things to do work from home. A big important thing is having empathy, especially during the pandemic and times like these, right? What I did is we are channel partners with IBM and Red Hat. So we have access to a lot of their cool stuff that's coming out before it even hits mainstream. And then immediately following that, I found some stuff that they posted online based on these times, which I thought was exceptional. And that is kind of like the IBM Work from Home Pledge. It just really shows how they're trying to be as human as possible and have this empathy. As soon as I saw it, I shared it with my teams, shared it with all the Alliance entities, and I think it just really resonated. As soon as I read it, I'm like, man, this is something that our team needs to know as well, and that our customers should have access to as well. So I just wanted to share it, and that's learning how to be family sensitive during these times, flexibility for personal needs. Right now I'm on camera, but sometimes we can't be on camera, not being ready for camera and understanding that. Being kind, that's just such a simple thing, but in life, we're always going through things behind the scenes. Forget about the pandemic, just things going on. So just being kind and having a little bit of patience with people during these times goes a long way. And then learning how to set boundaries. Both professionally and personally, I think is something that we should strive for. We kind of talked about the health, so taking care of yourself is one thing, but how about taking care of one another as far as maybe some extended check-ins, a few extra phone calls, and making sure that even though we're all at home, that we all feel connected. And again, this kind of comes back to culture. So I thought IBM did a really good job of posting some of this information publicly, so just wanting to share some of that stuff with everyone. All right, getting into some of the practical aspects and examples that I wanted to share with you. There's 3 little examples that I wanted to share. The first is communication systems. The second is going to be called virtual dailies, a little exercise that we do, a ritual that we have for our teams. And the third one is demos and showcases. These are a couple of rituals that we do as Agile teams within our process at Alliance Systems. So let's check out the first one. The first one, the tool of choice that we use in our organization is called Slack. And basically, if I were to break down the navigation of how we use this, or the main components of this application, is that it really has threads. You can mention people or things on threads by tagging. Everything is organized into specific channels, so you can reduce noise or participate in the appropriate channels depending on where you're at. Obviously, people are involved across all these channels, mentions, and threads. There's applications that you can connect and integrate, so you might use various tools that have notifications, dings, or certain settings, and those things can be flourished and surfaced up within Slack to make it productive. And then the quick file sharing. So if I need to shoot over a quick deck or a PowerPoint, we actually share a deck back and forth between Blake and I in preparation for today's presentation, all through Slack. So that's kind of the breakdown as far as sections. As far as use cases, the use cases that we have are basically, we do a lot of chatting. This is just kind of like, imagine tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, hey, Blake, I got a question for you. Can you help me out? So you get a little knock when someone kind of pings you. You can have one-on-one chats, you can have group chats, or you can provide communications through those channels that start opening up to larger teams and divisions. Obviously, file sharing, we already covered. And some use cases for the channels that we have. Obviously, we have 3 different entities all working as one, as Blake mentioned. So we have Alliance Technologies, Alliance Systems, and Alliance Advisors. So we break up communications inside of those specific divisions. We obviously have projects that are going on, so we have internal communications about what those projects are and where we're at. We've posted a lot of resource channels, so when we find good information, such as inspiration, maybe it's some marketing swipe, maybe it's announcements, kind of like the IBM thing that I just shared with you guys, we post those so we can all learn from each other, because we all come from different backgrounds and walks of life. So we share some awesome resources. So you can consider it like curating news, if you will. And then we have an awesome channel that I think is pretty cool. We call it Wins. And this is enjoying the wins from day to day. We don't care if it's a big win or a small win. If you feel that there was a win, post it so that everyone can kind of share in the success of that and kind of post back and say, great job. So these are just ways that we use Slack. Slack is not the only tool. So what I wanted to do is just present and at least share, if you're not using a tool like Slack, there are other tools out there that basically have this theme of communications and very, very similar functionality. I have actually used Microsoft Teams and River before on other teams, though Slack is probably my favorite based on usability. All these other applications have really great reviews online, so that's why I wanted to share them. Chanty, Flock, and Fleep are other good potentials. So you can kind of check those out and see if you don't have any of these tools, sometimes they have free trials or the base to start is free. So you can start testing those out. The next sample I wanted to share is dailies. Dailies, what is a daily? Let's start there. A daily stand-up session is where a team gathers to discuss what they're doing collectively to basically achieve a goal. A lot of the stand-up kind of mentality comes from Scrum and maybe some other Agile methodologies. I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but basically imagine standing around and basically having discussions every morning. It's stand-up because you don't want the meeting to be forever. And it's just a good solid check-in to make sure that you know what's going on with the team. I'll talk about the basic details of it in a second. So why have a daily stand-up? And ultimately, what you're trying to do is eliminate other meetings. So you're not having wasteful meetings throughout the day. Especially if I know a lot of people in the pandemic, they're like, man, Cesar, I wake up in the morning and I'm on Zoom all day long, back to back to back. I just have so many meetings. And sometimes I just don't feel they're productive. So imagine from a production point of view, having one meeting that if you run it correctly, you know what everyone's doing, and you get to unblock or eliminate any blockers. Anything that you can eliminate as far as obstacles for your team to move forward, that'd be pretty productive, right? Now, normally, under normal circumstances, we'd all gather around, take 15 to 20 minutes, do a little round robin, and face to face. It's pretty energetic and it's pretty neat to have those sessions. But sometimes you can't do that, you know? So what we've been doing is we can either choose to do it on Zoom, or I actually use Slack with our production team, and I posted a little example of kind of what I post. And the format is pretty simple. What did you do yesterday? What are you trying to accomplish today? And what are the blockers that you have that are preventing you from getting these tasks done? So every morning I wake up, I post my daily as soon as I get up and I start working. And sure enough, we have a policy where everybody on our production team posts their dailies. So I review every single one. I make comments for my team. And as a manager, I know exactly what everyone's trying to accomplish. The second thing that I do is I try to look at blockers. Who's being blocked by what? And I immediately chime in and say, hey, that's a call, that's a meeting, do you need me? Who do you need to talk to? Because I want to unblock my team. The way that I see my team is just like a race. Picture a Formula One race. It's great when all the cars are zipping around the track going 150, 200 miles an hour, but if there's a wreck, everything stops. And we don't want it to stop. We want that race to go on as fast as we can to make sure we're firing on all cylinders. So removing blockers and impediments is just keeping the race going. So this is a simple exercise that we do. Now it takes minutes. It doesn't even take 20 to 30 minutes. And I can see what everyone's doing in writing. And again, we encourage the face-to-face Zoom calls whenever there's blockers. So that's been working really well for our teams. And I've tried that in multiple organizations. The last example I wanted to kind of cover is what we call showcases and demos. This again comes from Agile methodology, in that if you're working on production related items, wouldn't it be neat to kind of get like a show and tell and have the ability to say, here's where we're at. Let me show you some of the things that we're doing. And what that creates is a lot of feedback loops with your customers. You can't work 1 month, deliver something, and then not think that there's going to be surprises because you haven't talked to the client for 30 days. So what our team does is we set up meetings every Tuesday and every Thursday, and then we have a half an hour scheduled block with our customers where we say, hey, we're going to highlight and we're going to give you a presentation today. Here's what we've been doing. So that's pretty much the showcase scenario. Demos are a little bit different. The context is very similar, but it's got one added plus to it. And that is we're looking for approval. So a part of the documentation that we have for transparency in our culture for our clients is we write what's called acceptance criteria. These are very specific points that in order to consider a task complete, you have to meet this acceptance criteria. So rather than just saying, hey, I'm just going to give you progress on this design, look at this beautiful design, we are starting to come up with the look and feel of this, that would be a showcase. A demo would be, notice that I took all these form fields that was business logic, and we have to collect that data. I created the validation requirements in case they put in the wrong data or miss filling out a field. And when they submit the data, I can prove that we're creating a record and that this email notification goes back out to the customer. In order for us to call this successful, we needed to make sure that all that is done, and I've proven that I can do that by giving you this demo today. Is it okay to call this now accepted so we can move this on to the development team, so on and so forth? That level of clarity, that level of documentation is critical for process, but not all teams have that culture. So again, you got to be disciplined, you got to have process and systems, but that's a level of transparency that we provide to our clients when we're working with systems. So that's just another example of things that you can do. They're practical. You just got to live up to, this is now a part of our culture, and now we're doing it. So with that said, hopefully you guys liked covering the challenges, covering what you might want to think about when creating a new plan, and lastly, some of these examples that I wanted to share with everyone today. And what I'll do is I'll hand it off back to Blake. Thank you very much.
Man, Cesar, that was excellent. I appreciate you sharing your insights. I mean, a lot of companies are just now working remotely for the first time, and you've been leading teams across different continents for over a decade now. So thank you for sharing that insight. Before we jump into the Q&A, I wanted to invite you all to join us for part 4. We're going to wrap up this 4-part webinar series with Jared Pino. He's the Chief Operating Officer and Partner at Alliance Technologies, and he's going to be sharing with us 3 requirements for a resilient workforce. So we're really looking forward to that. It's the same time next week, 1 o'clock, and if you registered for this webinar, you registered for them all, so hopefully you'll be able to join us. That being said, Cesar, if you're open to it, I have aggregated a few of the questions, and I'm going to throw a couple at you here. You ready?
Let's do it. And I'm sharing my contact information in case anyone wants to contact me while we're going through these questions. So fire away.
Sounds great. Okay, so the first one sounds like they never had an issue with micromanaging prior to COVID, but now that everyone is working remotely, it feels like the trust has kind of been lost and they feel like they're being micromanaged. So, what would you say to overcoming some of those challenges?
It's a pretty good question. I think I'd like to point that back to our conversation around culture, maybe extend that out to a little bit about core values. I think the main thing that we're talking here kind of piggybacks on the accountability and the transparency that we were talking about a little bit. I think in times like this, you need outstanding communication, not just good communication. And that means, virtual environments can only do so much. I think web conferencing and talking like this, and you can see my body language to a certain extent, is obviously better than a phone call, better than an email or a text, but there's still some challenges there, right? Especially when you log into systems and you might be checking in at different times. So having a culture that's like, you know what, we're going to set some clear expectations. Here is what we define success as, and we're going to track those results so that we all know if you're doing things correctly, I don't have to micromanage you. And that just takes another level of planning, to be honest with you. The best experience I can share is I learned about what's called scorecards through a system called EOS. It's called the Entrepreneur Operating System. So if you haven't looked into that, there are many other frameworks and scenarios like that. And scorecards is not specific to EOS, but that's where I learned it from. And imagine having scorecards where people are checking in with very, very important critical metrics or key performance metrics. They're saying, I'm getting these things done because we all dictated that that would lead to the success of the outcomes that we want. And sharing some of those metrics through the systems, that's one way to be very, very accountable and very transparent. So the need for micromanagement can go away a little bit. And then ultimately, you just need to find, I think, maybe a good balance between results, getting results, and providing the team the freedom to go out there and leverage their talents, right? If you don't have trust in your team, you might want to think about leveling up or training or providing some of those better soft skills to produce better results. But yeah, interesting question.
Yeah, we got time for one more here. Cesar, how do you manage or organize the client feedback at your weekly meetings?
Client feedback. So a couple of things. Number one, we have those rituals that we just talked about. So when we have those demos and showcases, not only do you have the people presenting, but you usually have a manager taking notes. And all those notes go inside of a project management system that we have. We use 2. One of them is Jira, which is our engineering management system. So all the production team members, whether it's a business analyst, whether it's a designer or a developer, they have their marching orders to go. But the other project management system we use is Basecamp. And we organize threads with message boards, text communications, and basically calendar of events to make sure that everyone's got an agenda and those details are shared back with the client. And that's just another application just dedicated to communicate back to clients. And lastly, Slack. A lot of Slack internally with the teams, just quick hit communications.
I want to be cognizant of everyone's time here, but here's an excellent question. I was going to wrap up, but I would rather you field this one. What are your thoughts on decreasing actual in-office hours moving forward to give employees more flexibility in their personal lives as long as their work is getting done?
I love performance and results over how long it took to get it, right? Everyone is different, everyone's unique. And now with our personal lives, we all have different schedules based on our health, our families, and things that are going on in our ecosystems. So if you do have a proper amount of accountability and transparency, and you're hitting the results, wouldn't you want your team to be happy and healthy and doing what they need to do when they're best suited at doing that? And if that optimizes their time, doesn't matter to me as a manager that it took 6 hours versus 8, as long as they're accomplishing things and we're all where we need to be. I think that's a culture question that I think I'd be for. Could we use the extra hours to do something else is probably the opportunity cost that other managers would discuss. But I think there's a healthy balance to at least achieve that, especially when you're hitting all your goals. If you're not hitting all your goals and you're struggling, obviously there's optimizations that you have to fulfill there. So it comes down to that balance, and every company is in a different, in a different place. So I think I'd be for it. I would definitely be for it.
If nothing else, this situation has really forced that realization and that flexibility. So we are right at the 30-minute mark, but I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable reaching out to you, Cesar, to make sure that you can elaborate further on some of these and share some of these insights. I realize it's just the tip of the iceberg for what you could have taught us today. And so do not be shy in reaching out for more information. His contact info is there. And we are hoping that we'll get to see you next week on the webinar to wrap up part 4 of 4. And real quickly, a little bit about Alliance Advisors. They have been the host of all of this content and done an excellent job putting this together for us. Alliance Advisors was formed to provide our clients access to a top-tier group of highly diverse senior professionals, Cesar included, each with decades of experience ranging from startups to multi-billion-dollar publicly traded corporations. Provide high-quality, value-focused, solution-driven consulting services. And that's really who put this team of experts together. And so, Cesar, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I hope everyone has an outstanding weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next week, Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Again, my pleasure, Blake. Thank you very much for setting this up for me.
Yeah, great job, man. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.